To start with, we're going to look at a chart to my right. On my right, we have the official picture of what the Access Center describes as its organizational chart. We have the county and the city who have created something called the Advisory Committee. We have something called the Access Membership, which is governed by something called the Access Membership Committee, which speaks to something that self-same Advisory Committee. The flow also continues to on the left from Joan's point of view, from a program director to two managers. The community outreach manager is our good friend cath, and the community access manager is our good friend Rick Bell. There is an additional line here, however, that I find very interesting. Then that is the line that says that the Access Membership Committee has some direct and presumably subordinate relationship to the community access manager. How that line came about and why it shouldn't be there is something we might discover more vividly from this other chart that I'm going to show you. And this is the chart that represents the alternative view of the Access universe. This was published, I think it was about last October. It actually came out as the centerfold of our producer's newsletter. It came out, in fact, just 1 week before cath was invited to work somewhere else. It represents the whole universe of public access. It has provision for what may be called the public domain. In the public domain are things, for instance, called the Board of County Commissioners, surrounded by their access mechanism called Government Access for the County. It has a group called the Tampa City Council, and it's surrounded by its opportunity to speak to the public, also another variety of government access television. It has over in the corner a little spot for educational access. It has a very important spot over here for something called public access. Public access is a term you don't hear here anymore because we are evolving into community access, whatever that may mean. All the rest of the space are our listeners. This is the whole interactive space of what it means to experience citizenship in a democracy. Out here, surrounding it, is the entire structure it takes to be sure that nothing goes wrong with how the public presents their case. It has nothing to do with the access for these people or the access for these people or the access for these people. There's even a little section up here in the corner called Olive Access, because Dave Olive has so much to do with giving us whatever we see of the Performing Arts Center. It has a little space here for the Tampa Tribune that produces articles about us. You may remember something called Sleazy Excess that came out a year ago. So all the players in the public space are represented here. And back again, all the structure it takes to be sure that the users, who coming down this path get transformed into something called members of the Access Center, where staff actually is shown now in place above them, and where their little committee occupies some space in the corner, and where their one representative comes up here to the end of this piece of work, which is called the Cable Advisory Committee, which straddles the entire operation. Now, before I get too far into jumping around the picture, let me describe the picture the way I wrote the article called Learning Access, a Guide to Understanding the Parts. The facing chart is a realistic interpretation of the two universes occupied by the community of access producers. One concerns content, that is the subject matter that we have to be, and want to be talking about, and the other is altogether a matter of structure. The first universe, shaded in gray, represents our opportunity to enjoy those First Amendment rights pertaining to freedom of speech, that in functional sociology would be our experience in what is called, after Richard John Newhouse's book, the naked public square. Newhouse believed it critical to democratic order that the public square should have many actors, the state being one actor among others. Indispensable to this arrangement are the institutional actors. A public square without its full company of actors is therefore naked, a vacuum begging to be filled. When the democratically affirmed institutions that generate and transmit values are excluded, the vacuum will be filled by the agent left in charge of the public square, the state. The FCC's 1984 answer to naked was naked but accessible public square, i.e. there is no explicit accommodation for institutional actors other than government. But an institution may be authentically represented by an individual in subjective possession of its ideals, whether that tradition be ordinarily represented by Hugh Hefner or by John Paul. Our few main Newhouse actors are identified here and clothed each in their FCC-designated access apparatus. Naked is now affected by the extravagance as measured by, say, the distribution of franchise fees and convolution of their respective wardrobes. Institutional actors here become NPOs. Those that claim to be value-bearing are much less likely to be found among, say, education's consortium than in public access. Suspended above the gray area, representing rank and file citizenry, are our city and county governments. Operation of their access apparatus is bundled with the cost of cable franchise administration, together consuming typically 60% of franchise revenue. Left then for public access and educational access are never quite as much as 40%, theoretically distributed as 1/3 to each, with the remaining 1/3 awarded on recommendation by something called the Cable Advisory Committee. In 1989, the Board of County Commissioners sent all of that franchise money to performing arts. Early last year, and you have to remember last year is 2 years ago here now, the BOC, Mike Forrester thought BOCC's government access television should even be in for one of the thirds, because the 60% they already consumed, quote unquote, benefited everybody. BOCC then abandoned Forrester and the workshop hearings, preferring, like the city, to distribute revenue out of view of the government access TV they fund. That portion of government called education, because after all, at the beginning of our series this year, we were talking about the education as becoming a department of government. That portion of government called education is also drawn out of the public square as being primarily concerned with, you guessed it, broadcasting school board meetings. The non-public universe in which we participate, non-public, non-public, is depicted by both natural, i.e. ideologically respectable, and CP-made. CP was the administrator for the city, who also doesn't work here anymore. CP-made, i.e. the guide or the LRP administrative objects. It elaborates a chart previously exhibited in my e-commentary May 1990, which will come up at the tail end of what I have to say here now, and is meant to be contrasted with the legitimating portions of Kempfe's organizational chart as presented, well, just a moment ago on the other easel.